Hello, welcome to Imbalancing the Spectrum with your host, Jose. So today we're going to talk about something interesting, at least interesting to me. Lately, I've been seeing some articles and I've read through some of them, uh, but they keep popping up, like in the recommended for you section. And I looked up even more articles on my search engine. So basically, what these articles are saying is that all conditions under the neurodivergent umbrella are not a neurochemical imbalance after all. And that to me does not make sense. The reason it doesn't make sense is because when you're a fetus, your brain is developing, and to reference a book called Touching a Nerve, The Self as a Brain by Patricia S. Churchland, she is a neuroscientist and author, and I'm going to loosely reference, not word for word. So, in her book, she refers to the brain as an architect, the architect that builds the blueprints. So, my interpretation of that is when we're in the uterus, our brain is already designing who we are meant to be. And what they call neurochemical imbalances, to me, it's not an imbalance at all. It's the process that the brain went through to build us. That's what I see it as. It's not an imbalance. People are always trying to put different people into different categories, when in reality, every single one of us is an individual. We are unique to ourselves. And this is what most people don't comprehend, which makes them resort to religion, faith, core values that are unique to them. And they try to reinforce it on other people, not realizing that it is normal. It's in our biology. And if more people were able to comprehend that, and at the very least, make their own opinion not based in something that they were told to believe in. So, if more people were that way, there would be more acceptance, in my opinion. There would be more tolerance. There wouldn't be segregation, discrimination, ignorance, because you would, at the very least, try to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and be able to at least take a step forward into acceptance of other people the way they are, and tolerance. I say tolerance because a lot of people don't have the tolerance, the patience to get to know someone. If you have tolerance, you are open to getting to know somebody for who they are. But before diving into the topic of today, which is neurochemical imbalances, I want to read a quote. It says, Maybe the journey isn't about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you, so that you can be who you were meant to be in the first place. This is a quote by Paulo Coelho. And it is a quote that relates to today's topic, which I would like you to keep in mind throughout this conversation. Now, get ready, because I'm about to spill some tea about these articles that I read. I read a total of 4 or 5 articles, and all of them basically said the same thing, except for one. Most of them said that these conditions, what we now know as neurodivergency, is due to a lack of development in the brain. And the other ones, or the other one, said that these conditions develop because of the lack of or overflow of certain neurotransmitters and hormones, which is literally the definition of a neurochemical imbalance. So I'm going to read this from Google. A neurochemical imbalance occurs when the levels of neurotransmitters in the brain are too high or too low. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that transmit signals between nerve cells and are responsible for regulating mood, behavior, and other brain functions. A neurochemical imbalance can contribute to a range of mental health conditions, including depression, anxiety, addiction, bipolar disorder, mood swings, and cognitive impairments. Symptoms of a neurochemical imbalance can vary depending on the specific neurotransmitter involved. For example, low levels of serotonin are commonly associated with depression, while an excess of dopamine may contribute to conditions like schizophrenia. So I just had to look up different brain hormones and neurotransmitters. This is what came up. I'm going to read them to you one by one and its definition. So, dopamine, a hormone that influences gratification-seeking behaviors. Now, let's pause that. I remembered that I had written down the definition of dopamine when I went to therapy, and I found it, and the definition that was given to me was neurotransmitter and hormone that plays a part in movement, memory, pleasure, and motivation. Keeping that in mind, that neurotransmitter alone can explain a lot of neurodivergent personalities. But moving on to the list, serotonin, a hormone that affects mood, sleep, appetite, and behavior. Low serotonin levels can lead to depression. Endorphins, hormones released in response to pain that help people push past their comfort levels. This one itself spoke out to me a lot. Endorphins. I knew what they were, I just never kept them in mind. But now that I'm reading it, it makes sense why people with depression would have spontaneous flares. I was trying to think of a word, but I couldn't come up with one, so I came up with flares. Spontaneous flares of depression. It would explain a lot. And as well with people that have anxiety, maybe, and I haven't looked into this, but maybe endorphins keep a person in their comfort zone and doesn't let them push past that. Maybe that's why a lot of people have attachment issues as well. Next hormone, estrogen. A hormone that may play a role in memory and cognition. Low estrogen levels can lead to mood swings, hot flashes, and difficulty concentrating. This does affect both men and women. More so women than men once they age. But both biological sexes can be affected by this. The next one is melatonin, which I absolutely knew about because my medication caused insomnia, so for a long time I had to depend on melatonin until it stopped working. For some reason, my medication does that. I drink something, take something in order to help me, but my medication blocks its effects after a while. So, melatonin is a hormone that signals the need for sleep. Very important. Growth hormone, a hormone that controls body growth, self-explanatory. And luteinizing, I'm not reading that right, or I'm not saying that right. Luteinizing hormone, a hormone that controls the function of the ovaries in females and the testes in males. Antidiuretic hormone, a hormone that regulates water balance and sodium levels. And it also says the hypothalamus and pituitary gland are located or near the brain and produce many of these hormones. So it's thanks to the hypothalamus and pituitary gland that these hormones and neurotransmitters are secreted. So I had to look up testosterone because it wasn't on that list. So I got curious, and this is off Google. It says testosterone is a sex hormone that affects many brain processes, including brain development, memory, brainwave activity, neurotransmitter receptors, which is important because when your neurotransmitter receptors are working properly, that means that the hormones and neurotransmitters are being accepted, they're being absorbed by your body. So those are very important. It does say testosterone can act as a neurotransmitter receptor, which may mediate a neuroactive effect. Androgen receptors. Testosterone can bind to androgen receptors to modulate gene expression. So that's important for our genetics. Estrogen receptors. Testosterone can be converted to estradiol or estradiol, I forget how you pronounce it, by aromatase, which then acts on estrogen receptors. So estradiol, if you don't know, it's a female hormone that I forget its function at the moment. Moving on to the list. Cognitive control. Testosterone levels affect the cognitive control of the amygdala, by the frontal cortex. This may lead to sex-specific differences in behavioral phenomena. So, of course, I had to look up more information about other hormones and how they affect the body. Once I go into a rabbit hole of information, it's difficult to get myself out of that because I like learning new things, especially things that can potentially affect me, my body, and the way that I act and think. All of that is important to me, and it's important to learn as much as we can. So, like I was saying, of course, I had to look up more information. So, I went and looked up estrogen. So, estrogen affects brain development, cognitive function, brain protection, mood and behavior, extra hypothalamic brain regions. So, for brain development, estrogen controls hundreds of genes in the brain and is present in the brains of both male and females, like I was saying earlier. Estrogen shapes the development of neural circuits in the brain and can cause physical differences between male and female brains. We'll dive into that a little further down the line. Cognitive function. Estrogen can improve cognitive function by affecting the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. Estrogen can enhance episodic memory retrieval and may also alter the functioning of the left prefrontal cortex during encoding. Also, for brain protection, it protects the central nervous system. However, estrogen levels decline during menopause, which can lead to a loss of brain volume in areas that are also affected by Alzheimer's. And this is not to scare anybody. If you have concerns about your health, mental or otherwise, uh, consult a doctor. That's something that you should do so you could know what's going on with your body. And if you're not getting the answers that you need, do your own research. Tell your doctor that you found this research and let them analyze with you, work with you, so that it's something that you could do with your doctor. Work with them and then work with you. But my advice is, if your doctor's first instinct is to medicate you, I would advise not to do it unless you actually need it. And that's something that you have to know. When my doctors wanted to medicate me for insomnia, I said no, because the medication that they were suggesting was too strong and it was addictive. The doctor said no, it's not addictive, but there was an outbreak in my town of what they wanted to prescribe me. So, first, know your body, know yourself, do the research to learn more about your health, and talk it out. Just talk it out with your doctors specifically, but if needed, to anybody else that's willing to listen. So, for mood and behavior, the way estrogen affects it. It fluctuates throughout life, causing changes in mood, energy, balance, and behavior. So when it came to the article, it made me curious, since their definition of chemical imbalance was different. I had to look up different conditions, like autism. So I read that autism has GAB's deficiency. So after reading about autism, of course I had to look up epilepsy since I have it. And the way doctors have described what epilepsy is, they have told me it's a brain disorder that causes your neurons to misfire, and it manifests itself as a convulsion, which is a seizure. So when I looked it up, it said yes, epilepsy is considered a chemical imbalance in the brain. And I started reading the key points of that chemical imbalance that causes epilepsy. So there's neurotransmitter disruption, and the neurotransmitters like a GABA, which is gamma aminobutyric acid, are the imbalance in their levels that can disrupt quote unquote normal brain signaling and triggering seizures. So that's what causes a seizure. The GABA and glutamate neurotransmitters. And I never actually knew that. You would think with all the research I've done about epilepsy, I would have found this information, but I hadn't up until now. So, under key points as well, there was ion channel dysfunction, which is abnormalities in the ion channels that control the flow of ions like sodium and potassium across neuron membranes. So that's also another key point that could cause epilepsy. And it's also genetic. A lot of people have genetic epilepsy. Some of them, I've heard that they have it up until their early adulthood or teenage years, and they stop having them. Unfortunately, I continue to have them. I'm way past my early adulthood. And also, brain damage. Brain damage can cause seizures or epilepsy as well, which is something that I've brought up constantly to my doctors when I get a new doctor. They switch doctors for me all the time. It's crazy how I actually lasted with this doctor now, because usually they switch. So I brought it up to my doctors in the past because I was dropped as a baby. I guess they let my cousin carry me while my parents were elsewhere. I don't know what the whole story is. But point being, I was given to my cousin. She dropped me. And when you drop a baby, their head, I don't know what it's called in English, but in Spanish it's called mollera, which is the soft part of your cranium. It hasn't fully calcified yet. So that can cause seizures, epilepsy. But also, there was another factor that could have affected me as well, apart from genetic, because at least in my mother's side, there have been multiple people, multiple family members with epilepsy. But for them, they stopped having them by adulthood. So, before I was dropped, came the birth. So, they had to do a C-section because I wouldn't come out. I guess I didn't want to come out. And maybe my fetus self was like, no, bro, you cannot come into this world because it is crazy as hell and it is a horror place to live in. That's probably why my fetus self didn't want to come out. So they do the C-section. When they do it, I'm not breathing. They rush me to get oxygen, and evidently I'm well, and well enough to be cognitive or to have consciousness. So I bring that up to my doctors as well. They say that either factor could be a possibility, whether it was me not being able to breathe during birth, because that causes the brain to not receive enough oxygen and you need it to be alive. And as for the fall or the drop, there's not much to say there. They just don't know what could be the factor, or if it could also be genetic. They just don't know. Or at least I haven't been told the reason, if they do know the reason. So then I went into more conditions such as ADD and ADHD. So I found that yes, ADD and ADHD are considered a chemical imbalance in the brain to a certain extent. And it only says that because it says the concept is complex and not definite explanation for the condition. Which is kind of, to me, sounds like a disclaimer that they may or may not know, but they go on to remember or to point out key points of what could be the cause of ADD, ADHD. So neurotransmitter involvement. People with ADHD have issues with the production, transmission, and reception of neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine. I hope I'm saying that right. Which are crucial for attention and focus. Which totally makes sense to me, and that's why my ADD may be all over the place a lot of the times, and that's probably why you hear a lot of exactly you may hear a lot of for me. There we go again, shit. Or just quiet noise, because my brain is constantly fluctuating ideas, thoughts, feelings. And in order to express myself fully, I have to reorganize, and I do this automatically now in my brain, in my mind. I have to reorganize those thoughts, try to avoid them, and keep focused, but they keep popping up like, hey, talk about me. I'm next. You want to talk about me. And I'm like, no, back of the line. Right now I need to focus on this, but sometimes they cut the line and I go off topic. I wouldn't consider this off topic because it does relate to the concept of everything that we've been talking about. So it also may be genetic, but when it comes to the genetic component, it just means that certain genes may predispose individuals to experience imbalances in brain chemicals, which in terms that we can all overstand, it's just the construction of genetics, your DNA. That's what may be a factor of ADD, ADHD. And it goes on to brain structure. It says that research suggests potential structural variations in certain brain regions of individuals with ADHD. So those symptoms that develop are usually observational, meaning you could see it. But most people don't know how to identify those behaviors and those changes people go through when they have ADD, ADHD. ADD is it's a whole lot subtler than ADHD. ADHD, you can pretty much tell when a person has it. But I did notice that when I looked up anxiety, it wasn't just the neurotransmitters, but something caught my eye, which is GABA. I mentioned that earlier, and I had to look that up. But before I go into that, anxiety. Since we spoke about anxiety last time, I might as well tell you how the brain processes anxiety or what the root may be. So, it involves neurotransmitters like dopamine, which we talked about a little bit, norepinephrine, serotonin, and GABA. So, these neurotransmitters are the ones considered to contribute to anxiety, but it is not the sole cause. It is not the main cause. There could also be genetic, environmental, and psychological factors, which I actually agree with, because nature versus nurture is very much real. And the way that nature is for us as individuals, other people cannot perceive it, especially when you're a kid. So they nurture you to become a certain way, and it can affect you, especially when you grew up in a household that was chaotic and very destructive, for lack of a better term. But going back to that neurotransmitter that I kept seeing everywhere, GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid. So it's a chemical that acts as a messenger in the brain to slow down information by blocking signals in the central nervous system. So this is what they call an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It like I just said, it works by blocking signals in the nervous system, central nervous system. And the reason it does that is because that's where our information travels through. So I consider it to be a very important neurotransmitter in every aspect, because every neurodivergent person has different symptoms, different experiences, different traumas that come from nurture, that come from your household, or even external trauma that comes from people who you are close to, but not a family member, such as schools, going to work, kids at school, people, co-workers, clients, etc. That's external trauma that can be caused in different ways. So, the way that you process information is individual to you. Everybody processes information in different ways. And from what I've observed and in my own experience, there are different ways that information is processed, and that's why we have our senses: hearing, sight, smell, taste, and touch. And I do strongly believe that when you're a kid, you process information by observing, by watching, and listening. Those are the two strongest ways for a kid to process information. Now, when I say kid, I do mean like 3 to 5 years old, and well, even older. So let's say from 3 years old to 13 years old. And this is not a fact, this is just me talking. So when you're within that age, you look at your environment, you're listening to what's going on in your environment, and the way you process information is affected by your environment. So that leads to behavior. Information reception can lead to your behavior. When you're a kid and live with your family, your guardians, or even look up to your role models, whoever they may be, they could be within your circle of your environment, or they could be external role models, such as celebrities or fictional characters. When you observe these role models, these people in your life, you can adopt some of the behaviors that you observe and listen to. This is why I strongly believe that um, hate, discrimination, segregation, it all comes from a place of observing and retaining that information. So if you see or hear somebody talk bad about a community of people, you might adopt those same thoughts, those same opinions, those same beliefs. And you lose your actual thoughts because initially you might think differently. And in my experience, at least from what I can remember, I was 3 years old. And that's when I started forming memories, I guess, because I can remember from 3, 4 years old onward. But when I was 3 years old, I spent a lot of time with my mom's family. And I heard comments here and there, jokes here and there, that made me think that I wasn't normal, that I wasn't like everybody else. So I felt excluded. And because of those observations, it led to me suppressing who I really was, what I really thought. Because as a kid, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, but kids are truthful and they're pure. They have an innocence that kind of gets corrupted as they grow up. At least that's a pattern that I've noticed, and not just with me, but in general. I see kids that their innocence gets corrupted along the way for whatever reason. So, when you have different thoughts, different opinions from everybody else, you suppress your feelings, you suppress your thoughts, and you become somebody else. Even though it's still you, it's not really your thoughts, your beliefs, your behavior. You're just adopting those thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. So, this could lead to a lot of things, really, such as a person or a kid who is very submissive, and they classify that kid as shy. I know that as I was growing up, people always called me shy, but really what I was doing was being submissive. I was taught to look, listen, be quiet, don't have an opinion. So every time I had an opinion, there was repercussions. So I fear the repercussions or the consequences, and those consequences made me act submissive. So there has been in my life people who have told me that they want to do certain things, and I'm talking about people as older than me, parents, uncles, aunts, whatever. Um, so in my life, I had experienced, I don't even know how to call it. Like, there's no word that I could come up that could work as an adjective. But I was basically groomed to think that certain unethical things were ethical. And I won't go deep into it. I'll save that for another time. But I grew up thinking certain unethical things were ethical, even though as a kid, I knew it was wrong. But I went along with it because I knew that there could be repercussions, so I feared the consequences more so than I believed in my truth and I believed in my opinions. So it led me to be a very unopinionated kid growing up, and it caused me to create friction without even noticing that I was creating friction. And I fortunately learned to accept myself as I am, my thoughts, my behavior, and it has helped me become very opinionated. So, when it comes to negative behaviors, that person might think it's ethical in their mind when it's actually not. And, or at least in everybody else's perspective, it's wrong. For example, cheating. I don't condone cheating at all. It is very unethical to me, but I have met people that have told me I'm cheating and it's okay, and then they tell me some reason to justify it. And in my mind, when I met those people, when I talk to those people, because it hasn't just been one, it's been several people, and I know why I had to meet those people because of what happened in my childhood. Again, not going into that this time around, but when I met these people, they were convinced 100% what they were doing was okay. And it took me a while to actually voice an opinion and tell them, like, no, cheating is not okay in any way because you're harming somebody else. And by harming somebody else, you're harming yourself. You're poisoning yourself. It creates an environment within you that becomes toxic. And you're no longer yourself. So you have to do a lot of inner work to work through that pain, to work through that trauma, whatever it may be. And ask yourself, what I'm doing, is it okay to do? And why is it okay to do it? Such as, let's stick with cheating. If you think it's okay to cheat, okay, cool. Good for you. Um, but you never ask yourself, at least the people that I've met, you don't ask yourself, how is me cheating going to affect people around me? You do it by instinct. Always ask yourself when it's an action that could have negative effects on somebody else's experience, it might not be the right choice. Then again, sometimes choices that we make, that we feel good about, and I'm not talking about cheating at the moment, I'm talking about choices or actions that you do for yourself. Like, for example, if I want to wear blue, but everybody else in my circle doesn't like blue, do I ask myself, am I harming them? They're gonna feel bothered, angry, whatever negative feelings they may have towards blue. But if wearing blue makes me feel good, I'm gonna wear it because it makes me feel good. When it comes to cheating, I have asked people, does it make you feel good? And their response varies. Some of them have said it's a stress reliever. Some of them have said that it makes them feel good in the moment, but then they feel bad about themselves after. Those feelings are the ones that I'm talking about. If you don't feel good within yourself, those choices are the wrong ones for you, and you're only making those choices based on behavior observation that you have had in the past. Whether it has been affected directly to you, that you were cheated on at one point, so that's why you cheat, or if you saw your parents cheat, or your uncles, or your role models, external role models, such as celebrities or fiction characters. Fiction characters can be role models too. If you observed these persons and characters cheat, then you adopted that because you looked up to those people as guidance. And again, I'm talking about from 3 years old until your teen years. That's when a lot of information process happens for most of us. It's looking and hearing. Those are the strongest ones that I'm aware of. But there are people that receive information through smell. And we all do it, of course, but it's stronger for others than for ourselves. Also, taste. Like, smell and taste go together. You only taste because you can smell. So if you're a chef, how do you process your information, your ingredients? Well, you smell them and you taste them, and you create your own recipes by mixing flavors and smells that go well together. You know how to process that information to an outstanding point. I think it's a talent to have that sort of scent and taste to create something is very wonderful. It's wonderful to me. So earlier I mentioned how when I was a kid I had to suppress my feelings and my thoughts, and I became submissive. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about that. To start off, I do want to say that no 3-year-old chooses to be anything. They don't choose to be as they are, be as they were born into this world. Just like we don't choose what color our complexion, our hair, our eyes are gonna be. We don't choose none of that. Same thing with our inner dialogue and our sense of self. We don't choose it. But the brain does have a function that allows one part of the brain send information to other parts of the brain, and that information is translated into what manifests as feelings, emotions, perceptions, thoughts, opinions. So it's all in your brain. Like I said at the beginning, the brain is the architect. We are the blueprints. Like the brain already did all the work through brain development, and it said, okay, this is who you're gonna be, this is how you're gonna be, and your body knows it. So listen to your body, listen to your feelings, listen to your thoughts. You will be receiving information, and you have to be aware of it. And as a kid, we are aware of it. We are 100% aware of who we are and what we like and everything else. We're aware, but we don't know how to express it because those words, those labels, don't make sense to a kid. So, when you grow older, you start using labels because it's the only way to communicate what you feel, what you are. And this is when it comes to us accepting those labels. I've said before, I only use labels for sake of communication. Other than that, I don't use labels. So, when I was 3 years old, this is actually one of my first memories that I could recall regarding to my sexuality. So, I remember there being this child star, well, two of them, two child stars, one of them female, one of them male, a boy and a girl. And I was 3 years old. I would see them and I would feel something that attracted me to both of them. But because my 3-year-old self recalls listening to adult conversations and how they express themselves about queer people, I told myself it's better to suppress that, not tell anybody I'm feeling that, because it's wrong. They say it's wrong, so it must be wrong. And you truly believe it as a kid. If an adult tells you an apple is red, you're gonna believe it. And of course, an apple is red. I'm using a color because it's the only way that I could think of at the moment to describe um, how we accept what people older than us tell us. So the apple is red. But then you hear somebody else, maybe somebody that you're closer to, tell you the apple is green, it's not red. Even though it is red, you're going to believe them. As a kid, you're going to believe them. Because as a kid, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what life's about. So you're trying to find guides that will teach you what you're doing, what you're supposed to do. But of course, that later changes for some people, not everybody. I know it took me a while to realize that, and it wasn't until my early 20s that I started realizing all this stuff. But when I was 3 years old, I said it was wrong. Liking that kid, feeling attracted to that boy, felt wrong as a 3-year-old, so I never said anything. They would ask me, "Who's your girlfriend? Do you have a girlfriend?" And I would always say her name's Anai. And the adults that I was surrounded by, not just my parents, would be like, "Ooh, yeah, go get it," whatever. Like, me recalling that feels annoying because it's an expectation that they had. You look like a boy, you are a boy, so you have to like girls. But in my mind, when they would ask me that, verbally I would say Anai, but internally I was thinking, and I also have a boyfriend. And I don't even know if he has a career now. I never actually kept up tabs on him. It was just when I was 3 years old. And I believe his name was or is Manolo. They would call him Manolo, the kid star, or the star kid. Um, so I grew up and I felt attraction for both men and women, boys and girls. I remember being 5 years old, I was attracted to this uh, blonde girl, and at the time, I didn't know English. I was barely learning it, and this was at school. So, my first language is Spanish. So, she comes up to me and she's speaking English, and I said the only word that could come to mind was shut up. I made her cry. She goes and tells her mom. Her mom worked there. Her mom comes to me and tells me it's wrong to tell people shut up. And I had another encounter in the playground. I was 5 years old and it was with a boy. He was in the monkey bars, and I always knew that he was always at the monkey bars. I didn't know why I paid attention to him a lot when I was 5 years old. But the monkey bars and the slides were next to each other. I would go on the slides. And I remember sliding down, and the monkey bars were in front of the slide. So as I slid down and stood up, he was trying to climb the monkey bars to get on the monkey bars. And since I was on the ground, he tried to help me and he was speaking Spanish to me. And in that moment, I felt something, this magnetic feeling towards him. And both of these people, both of these kids, I went to school with them from kinder to 8th grade. So when I started going more, let's skip to 10 years old. Damn, okay. 10 years old, I was in 5th grade. And I felt my body changing and my thoughts changing. They were becoming more sexual than magnetic. And as a kid, I didn't know why this was happening. It wasn't explained to me. Yeah, we had sex ed, but they go over the basics. They don't go over how testosterone and estrogen and all those sex hormones affect your body and your mind. So, I'm not afraid to disclose this. Like, as a kid, I would be paying attention in class, and all of a sudden, the sexual image of whatever it was would come into mind. I didn't, and it would just be picturing somebody nude. And that was weird phase for me. And once I was 11, 12, around that age, I didn't have those spontaneous images anymore. But I started being curious about other things. And it wasn't until I was 13 that I looked up, how do you know if you're gay? And I remember the answer to that being was, well, if you talk like this and walk like this, and you don't like certain things that straight boys like, and you like the more feminine things. I remember that being the answer, and I was confused out of my mind because I liked both what was considered masculine and feminine. I liked both those things. And throughout that whole time, from 3 to 11, 12 years old, I kept it to myself. I didn't say it out loud to anybody. But in middle school, they would call me Jotose. Jotose is a mixture of my name and the Spanish word Joto. Joto means faggot. And so kids around me knew even before I did. Like, I guess not new, but they knew the vocabulary. They knew what it was. I grew up kind of shuttled and didn't know much about the world or anything. It was just school, home. No friends, and the little bit of friends that I had were temporary and were actually chosen by my mom. I wasn't allowed to choose my own friends, I guess. Uh, and I'm talking about friends that you hang out after school on the weekends. And there was a friendship that built into a long term friendship with this girl, but we are no longer friends. Um, but anyway, they knew before I did how to express it in words. And they would also call me Josefina, Josephine. So in middle school, it was a little bit hard for me because I was bullied, and to the point where it made me feel bad about myself. It made me feel like I wasn't worth it. And when it came to my home life, uh, there were repercussions, there were consequences to everything. So as a kid, I learned that I should not speak my thoughts and I should not act upon them. If I wanted to play with a doll, well, I would repress that. I remember, and I was actually 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, backtracking a little bit. I wanted to play with dolls. My cousins had dolls, and um, I didn't tell them. I just kept it in the back of my mind because I was always told dolls were for girls. And I would see them and play with them, and or not play with them, but I would see them playing with each other. And I remember this specific occasion where uh, my cousin's sisters, it was three of them, they stopped playing with her, and she was the youngest. So she was sad and mad that her sisters wouldn't play with her. And my mom goes, "Go play with her so she's not sad." And I didn't want to. And she forced me, my mom forced me to play with dolls and with my cousin, which I'm not gonna lie, I actually enjoyed playing with dolls. Even though I was trying to act like I didn't. And the reason I did that was because I already knew if I showed some sort of pleasure, that once I arrived home, there was going to be scolding, possibly hitting, uh, from my mom. My mom was the one that, quote unquote, disciplined us. And her type of discipline would be based on physical violence. So, yeah, unfortunately, I did go through that. And going through all that violence, I knew not to overstep the line. Whatever situation it was, I knew not to overstep it because there would be consequences for me. So, going back to, or returning to middle school. Middle school was hell for me, but by 8th grade, I made some friends at school. And I was always curious if they were gay. And honestly, when it came to recess, most of the boys would go to the soccer field. Most of the girls would go to the swings and the slides or just hang out um, watching the boys play soccer. But me, I preferred to play tetherball and foursquare. So I don't know why, but tetherball was seen as a sport or I guess a game for girls. I don't know why that was. And that was at my school. I don't know about other schools. So at my school, it was seen that way, and I don't get why. Foursquare was also seen as feminine. Why? I don't know. But the friends that I did make played Foursquare, and both of those boys who are now grown turned out to be part of the LGBT community. And maybe that's why we got along so well at school, because we kind of knew what was going on in their minds, what attractions they felt. So maybe there was that. Now, in high school, I knew nobody. Most of the people who I went to kinder all the way to 8th grade, they went to the same school, but I went to a different one. And only one of my friends went to that school. To be clear, 2 classmates from middle school went to my high school, and they were going out with each other. But I would see her in the halls, my friend, and in the beginning I would say hi, and she would kind of ignore me. So my freshman year was basically me missing my friend, and it made me a loner. Uh, because I didn't know how to interact with other people. And I would hear conversations, and those conversations were weird to me, or I just didn't get the logic. Back then, I was very judgmental and not open to very much. Because, again, I lived in an enclosed space where I was kept from real life situations, whereas these kids in high school, they already knew about life. They knew at least the basics, and I did not. So they had that in common, and because I didn't, I would exclude myself. And slowly, as the years passed, it wasn't until my junior year that I started talking to people. And in my junior year, um, yeah, I think it was my junior year. I was 16, and the day after New Year's Day was 2nd of January. I came out to my parents as bisexual. So, their response was unique, to say the least. All this time, from middle school all the way to high school, every year my mom would pull me aside and tell me, I love you unconditionally. And I believe she already knew, because every year was the same conversation. I love you unconditionally. And if you like boys, it's okay. You can tell me. Do you like boys? No. Every year I would give the same answer. So when I came out to them, my mom, her first reaction was, you need God. And she said some very unkind things and disowned me. She disowned me from her family. She didn't recognize me as her son anymore. Those were her words. My dad stood up, gave me a hug, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and said, I love you as you are, however that is that you are. And to me, that completely flipped the script on how I viewed my parents, because my mom groomed me to think that my dad didn't care about me, that didn't love me, that was focused on money. And as a kid, I would repeat those words to my dad when he wanted to hang out with me or do something with me, an activity. So I did push him, because my mom kind of fed me these feelings of rejection and neglect from my dad. And because of that, I rejected and neglected him as a kid, all the way up till when I was 16 years old. That's when I opened my eyes and I saw my parents as they were. My mom, I saw her as manipulative, liar, and controlling. And my dad, I saw as caring, protective, wanting to be there, at least physically be there for you, for me. And I remember that when I came out, it was before my mom decided to go. She had an affair and she was gonna go live with him. And I already knew about this affair. She actually confided in me since I was a kid, telling me that she was not happy with my dad, that she didn't love him, but she sticked around. Now in retrospect, and I see, like, she stuck around. She could have just left, but she had to cheat on him multiple times to find the right person to be with. I don't know if she's happy or not, if she's still with them. But when it came to the relationship of my dad and my mom, she cheated a lot. I was her accomplice. I was turned into her accomplice. I would lie for her. I did a lot of things that I was ashamed of, but I've forgiven myself, and I accept those mistakes because they were mistakes. And now I can be myself. that was the first step for me coming out into being myself. And while she was staying with us, because my dad was cool about it, she let her stay with us until she was ready to make the move and move with her lover. The time that she was with us, she tried kicking me out of the house multiple times. I believe it was 3 or 4 times total. And I remember the first time, it was snowy outside, it was icy outside, it was cold as fuck. She kicked me out while my dad was at work, and I start walking and I don't know where to go. So I I took the route that I would take to go to my school. It was about 2 miles from my home. So walking 2 miles in the cold, I was freezing. I didn't take anything with me. I just remember walking and I didn't know where I was going. When I hit an intersection, I remember that a friend of mine lived in one of the houses in the corner. So my intention at that moment was, I need to go to him, see if he could help me somehow. Even though it actually depended on the parents, in my mind at that time, it was, I hope he could help me. So as I'm getting closer to the intersection, my dad is coming home from work, and I didn't know that was the route he took, but he's coming home from work, and he says, what are you doing? What the fuck are you doing here? And he had this angry expression, but it wasn't towards me, because he looked at me and my face was frozen from my tears. And my dad said, "Get in." And I said, "No. I've been kicked out of the house and I can't go back." He says, "Get in. No one's kicking you out of the house. She doesn't have a say in it because she's leaving." So I get in the truck and I start to defrost. My dad was more worried about my temperature being frozen. And he remembers there being a booger icicle from all the crying and the cold at the same time. And he even though he doesn't like turning on the heater, he turned it on for me so I could defrost. We get home, my parents getting in an argument, and he tells her, "You have no say whether he stays or leaves. The one that's leaving is you, so leave him alone." After that, multiple things happened. My mom was abusive, physically abusive towards me. She would make me feel like I was worth nothing with her words. She would also try to kick me out. I believe 2 or 3 more times after the first time. And at the time, I was talking to someone online, and this is the person I was talking about who we got jumped, or when we got jumped. So I started talking to him in January after I came out, and by March we became a virtual couple because it was a long distance relationship. And I didn't really know what a relationship was until I met this person. Um, because I would have online relationships with guys and girls, uh, but they always felt like just a little bit of fun, and that's it. But when I met this person, I was invested. Like, I admired the way he was, the way I perceived him, to be precise. And he is a person that taught me how to take the first step into self-acceptance. Even though, ironically, he wasn't out to his family or anybody, just a couple of his close friends. And he had a lot of insecurities himself, but because of his insecurities and the way he spoke to me, it was the help that I needed. He didn't verbally tell me anything or written. He didn't tell me anything that said, oh, I need to accept myself. No, it was the relationship itself that made me feel comfortable and made me realize that I needed self-acceptance. Because before that relationship, I really believed I was worth nothing. That a piece of shit was worth more than me. So, my mom knew that I was talking to someone. She saw my mood change. I was happier, perkier, and she decides to take my phone away. And she calls the company and cancels my line. And she did all that, and repeatedly over a course of about 4 or 5 months. So my dad got mad when she did that the first time, and he called the company to reinstall my line and to tell them that nobody else could call the shots because it was under his name. And they told him, but she told us she's your wife. And my dad responded with, whose name is on the contract? And they said, your name. So he replied with, exactly, and you have to respect that. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble if this ever happens again. So from then on, my mom went into other methods. She would sneak into my room, grab my laptop, because I would chat with him through my laptop as well. And she hid my laptop, snuck into my room to get my phone and hide it. And she went as far as, once my dad said, you have to respect his privacy, he's self-discovering and all of this crap, and You have to respect that, otherwise you can't be staying here no more. Which in my opinion, I think he should have kicked her out sooner. So she went as far as to uh, unscrewing my door, the bolts to my door, or whatever, the hinges to my door. So she took the door, and I had no door. My dad came home, and he said, "What happened to your door?" And I was like, "She took it. Uh, I don't know where it's at." And I remember my dad being so pissed off. He screwed my door back, and I don't remember if it was that exact day or after, but he was so pissed off, he confronted her again, and this time he said, "You're out. You have no authority in this house anymore. You made your choice to be with someone else, so go do that." So after she left, and she left to a friend's house, which her daughter was my close friend. We called each other brother, sister. That relationship was so strong. Um, so she went with them, and my friend at the time was not happy at all. She was not happy that my mom was there. And I remember her coming over wanting to spend the night, my friend, and um, my mom was the type of person, or is the type of person, who will get into your head. They will, she will make you feel uneasy, or she will feed you worries that shouldn't be there, or anger, any type of emotion, she could feed it to you. So that's what she did with my friend's parents, specifically her mom. And her mom was like, "No, you can't go visit him, you can't stay the night," because we would always have sleepovers. But she wouldn't let her stay over because my mom fed her negative things about me and my dad. Um, so yeah, that happened, and there's more to the story that goes a long way. Basically, my mom, I remember it being summer, came back to the house and forced my little brother out the house. He didn't want to go, but um, because he didn't want to go, he hid under the table, and my mom couldn't get to him. So she called reinforcements, and this was at a later day. This was like her third attempt to try and force him out of the house. So when she called reinforcements, she called her cousin, and between her and my mom, they convinced my little brother to leave the house by tricking him to go to Worlds of Fun. That they were gonna go to Kansas City and ride the rides. It never happened. Once out of the house, she took my brother to live with her and her friend. So at this point, she's overstaying her welcome, and She would not let us have interactions with our brother. She kept him away for a long time. And it was just after they left um, the city, the town, after they left, very, very little communication was had. He would have to beg to call us. I remember this because he would tell us. So, going back to the reason I suppressed all of that, uh, it was because I was afraid that who I am would not be accepted, not just in society, but in family as well. And unfortunately, a lot of times that's the case. My mom disowned me. And yes, I still say my mom because biologically she is my mother. But emotionally, physically, mentally, I don't see her as a mother. I don't see her as a mother role. And after all of what she did, yeah, even less. I'll say this, I don't trust her. I've had conversations with her, I've forgiven her, and I've forgiven myself for feeling guilty um, for so many things. Uh, Specifically towards my dad, that the fact that I had pushed him away and neglected him for the longest time because of the words that my mom would whisper into my ear. I forgive myself for that. And also, I forgive myself for feeling guilty that I pushed my mom away by coming out of the closet. Now I know I did not have to feel guilty about that at all. The person that you are is supposed to be unapologetic, authentic. So, the years pass, and a lot of events happen that I won't go into. But living with my dad, after my middle brother graduated high school, he decided to move with my sister-in-law. And up until today, they're still together, and from what I can tell, they have a loving relationship and support one another. So, I was living with my dad, just the two of us alone. And the dynamic kind of changed after 2018. And I didn't do this on purpose, or I didn't plan this on purpose. But I came out on New Year's Day again. This time, and this was the third time of me coming out to my dad, like, what's going on? But we'll talk about those coming outs another time and go deeper into it. But the third time that I came out was in 2018, and the reason I had to come out, or I felt the need to come out, was because I was feeling more myself. I was learning to love myself, not just accept myself, but love myself. And I realized things that I had put aside in my blind spot. And what I discovered it is that I did not identify as man or woman, female, male, masculine, feminine. Biologically, I'm a man and I accept my body as it is, but my mental ID, which is gender, not biological sex. Biological sex is what you are assigned as at birth, and they only have two options: male, female, man, woman. And even though there's intersex children, they only have those two options. So a lot of intersex children are assigned the incorrect sex. And those kids go through a lot. Mutilation, harassment, abuse, physical or otherwise. And there's a documentary that I watched. It's on Tubi for free. And if you're interested in learning more about intersex children and what they go through and see them as they are, I recommend this documentary. It's called Intersexion. That's Intersex ION. But yes, I was learning to love myself, accepting the fact that within me I feel masculine and feminine at all times. Sometimes I want to girly it up a bit. Sometimes I want to manly it up a bit. Sometimes I'm in between. Actually, most times I'm in between. So the whole reason that I brought all of this up is because our brain, the architect, decides who we're going to be and what we're going to think and what gender is going to identify with us, our mental identity, that's gender. And it also decides what your biological sex is going to be. Male, female, or intersex. To my knowledge, those are the three biological sexes. I don't know if others exist. And I do know that they tend to hide the actual numbers of intersex children because they mutilate them, and I use that word because that's what it is, in order to change their biological, what doctors think is their biological sex. So yeah, it's a rough life to live. I can only imagine. I haven't lived through that, and I know I never will. So it's unfortunate that a lot of kids go through this stuff. Again, if you're interested in that documentary, it's called Intersexion on Tubi, Tubi. So for a very long time, I asked myself questions I didn't have the answers to, and I would replace those answers with answers that I thought other people would be more accepting of. I would ask myself, why do I like men and women? Why do I like masculine and feminine things? And I would replace it with something that was more accepting to others and would act upon it. So if somebody else thought that because I look like a man, I have to dress like a man, well, I would do that. Um, Even though now I know that men fashion over the years has changed a lot. So what is now defined as feminine clothing, men used to wear those things too. And a lot of feminine clothing started out as masculine, which is ironic. But yeah, the more I looked into myself, the more answers I found and realized that I had the answers all along. But biologically speaking, when you're in your early development as a fetus, your fetus self starts out as female. If you think about it in this metaphor, and I'm not the most technologically bright, but if you think about it in this way, the brain as a motherboard and your body as a computer. Uh, the motherboard has default settings that later on, once you start using your computer, you can install new programs and uh, the software updates and all that. So same thing with our bodies. And again, I apologize if I'm using the wrong terminology. I'm not the most bright when it comes to technology. In our fetal bodies, we have default settings, which is female. Some people would say it's neutral. But if the Y chromosome for a male, if the Y chromosome is introduced, then the ovaries become testicles. If the Y chromosome isn't introduced, they become ovaries. But when they do become testicles, they start producing testosterone and they release it into the bloodstream, allowing the brain to grow. And this is what causes the anatomy of a biological man. So all this testosterone being produced by the testicles, it is being sent to the brain and it goes through a process that they call masculinization of the brain. But if it doesn't masculinize, then it stays female. So you have a female brain if it doesn't go into the masculinization process. Sometimes the brain enters this masculinization process, but it's a lesser amount of masculinization, so it doesn't masculinize all the way. That's the best way that I could put it, I think. But before the brain enters masculinization, the ovaries masculinize when the Y chromosome makes an appearance. By doing this, you not only create testes, but also penis and prostate. So that's how men develop, by pumping testosterone into the bloodstream. So there are cases when you have an XY chromosome, and that means you're male genetically, but during your fetal time, you do not masculinize the brain for whatever reason. This will probably, once the baby is born, they will probably be born with a vagina, and they would be confused to be female at birth, even though genetically speaking they are male. There is a possibility that they will grow breasts during puberty, but they will not menstruate because they don't have ovaries. And this kind of goes into the intersex children part of what I was talking about earlier. And as for sexual orientation, this fetus, this baby, can grow up to like male, female, or both. So that has to do with I believe it's the hypothalamus. But on the other hand, if a fetus with chromosomes XX becomes exposed to higher levels of testosterone while in the womb, their ovaries at birth may look ambiguous. Their sexual, not just their ovaries, their sex organs will be kind of ambiguous. In some cases, these babies are born with a large clitoris, or what may be confused as a small penis. And in puberty, there's this surge, this wave of testosterone that may or may not develop into a normal penis, and the testicles will drop. And while we're talking about chromosomes and such, a person who genetically is XY, meaning they are fully male, a person who has developed male organs, may not feel or identify completely as a man. So when it comes to gender, this is going into gender territory. They might feel female, just like a woman who genetically has XX chromosomes. In their mind, they may feel like a man. And this is all biological. This is science. Like the science behind it supports it. It supports the idea and proves why people are how they are, and it's all due to the brain. The brain designs everything. Even though I can't remember what this hormone is called, but there's a specific hormone that moves into the hypothalamus, and when this happens, if it doesn't If it doesn't move into the hypothalamus, the brain cannot masculinize. If it does, it masculinizes. So that's why men who don't go into the masculinization process may identify as female, even though that they produce testosterone and it circulates in their blood. They might still identify this way. Most male to female, female to male, transgendered people, they have normal levels of either testosterone or estrogen. If it's male to female, you have normal levels of testosterone. If you are female to male, you have normal levels of estrogen in your body. So it has nothing to do with the levels of the hormones in our body. It does have to do with the brain, though. There's this part close to the thalamus, I believe, that in males is double the size compared to female brains. When it comes to transgendered people, a trans person who is male to female has that part of the brain look closer to what is female. And if you're female to male, then that size of the brain looks bigger like a male brain. So again, it's not about hormones, it's about the brain development, the masculinization of the brain, or not. And you might be asking, but well, okay, that explains gender identity, but what about sexual identity, your sexual orientation? Well, it happens to be affected by the hypothalamus, depending on the genetic and chromosome variations that can occur in the brain. So they have found that in male homosexuals, the hypothalamus happens to be smaller than a heterosexual male brain, and it appears more of a female brain. And same thing with lesbians. Their hypothalamus looks bigger than the actual female brain. So all in all, who you are as a person, whether it be gender, sexual orientation, neurodivergency, it is all predesigned before your birth. You are who you are because your brain designed you that way. It is biology, it is nature, and we as a community have to be accepting of others and their differences, because if we don't accept them, that means that we hold them to a standard higher than what we hold us to. And if we don't hold ourselves to a certain standard, that's when we divide ourselves and also think that others should think the way we do. I've said this before. But if you're asking or have asked yourself, why am I this way? Why do I act this way? I don't feel normal. What is normal? Normal doesn't really exist. It's just a word to hold people to a certain standard so that everybody acts similar to one another. When in reality, we can be or act the way we feel inside. That's what matters. And now you know, if you didn't before, now you do, that the person that you are is pre-designed. You are born into this life as the person that you were supposed to be. So, scientifically, biologically, it is proven that we are this way, whatever way we may be, because our brain designed us this way. And you might ask yourself, but what will others think? What if I let them down? What if I cause some sort of disappointment? Or if I anger them for being myself? Well, don't worry about it. You are yourself. And at the end of the day, you have yourself. Yeah, you may have a support system, but if that support system doesn't accept you fully 100% as you are, then all you can do is support yourself. You are your support system. And this makes a lot of sense to me. It may not to some of you or most of you, because over the years I've done so much introspection to the point where I'm like, I get it. I know why I am this way. I know why I have epilepsy. I know why I'm gay. I know why I'm non-binary. I'm putting labels just for sake of communication. Yeah, like I know who I am and why. And now, biologically, it makes sense to me. Okay, like at first, it was spiritual. It was very much, I was made this way to share who I am with the world. That's why I was made this way. But now, I can comprehend it in a scientific perspective and say, I am this way because the brain is designed this way. Yeah, unfortunately, I do have epilepsy. I wish I didn't, but my brain decided it's so. It needed for me to be put in this situation so that I could learn more about myself and how to have empathy. Spiritually speaking, I truly believe that. I believe that I was given epilepsy from a young age up until now so that I could experience empathy for other people. And also, I haven't said this before, but my medication over the years caused me to have osteoporosis at an early age. I was diagnosed in my early 20s, about 8 years ago. And at first they didn't believe me, so I went to a pop-up health fair, and I was going for my eyes. I wanted to check my eyes out, but I saw that they had an osteoporosis check, and I went in. They told me, "What are you doing here? You're too young for this." I told them I feel like my bones are hurting all the time. They're like, fine, but you're gonna be okay. They do the heel tap, that's what it's called. So it scans your bone mass, or not your bone mass, the C scores in your bones, in your body. And they told me that my C scores were too low for a person my age. They asked me, do you take any medication? I said yes. I told them what it was. They're like, oh, that's why. So I took it to my doctor because they gave me a slip telling me how low the score was. Took it to my doctor and they're like, oh, okay. We need to look into this and we need to find out what's happening in your body. So they did a DEXA scan, which is a bone mass scan and muscle mass. And when they did the scan, they told me that the results were having a body of a 50-year-old man. Mind you, this was 8 years ago, and my osteoporosis keeps progressing, so my bones are deteriorating little by little. And I'm okay with that. At first, I thought my life was over when they first told me that. But now I look back, and even now, I'm like, I have osteoporosis so that I could understand people with invisible illnesses. Epilepsy is an invisible illness, but I got used to having seizures to the point where I thought it didn't matter anymore. Therefore, I felt like I was the only one going through it and nobody else could understand me. So when they diagnosed me with osteoporosis, I was like, okay, I've met people with invisible illnesses and I get it now. I used to victimize myself, but now I say I was born this way because I was meant to have this journey. And I do believe in fate and that you could change your fate based on your decisions. So, if I were to be as accepting as I am now, if I kept victimizing myself, I would have lost myself a long time ago. I would have lost my sense of myself a long time ago. And I would have played the victim card over and over, and that's not something I want to do. So because of this diagnosis, I'm thankful for that, opening my eyes that I am not a victim. I'm simply living life the way that I've been able to as much as possible, and I have to make the best of everything that I can in the moment that I can. And yeah, this went on a little long, so I'll stop here. But thank you for tuning in. I know it was a long discussion. We did go all over the place. Talked about brain design, gender, sexuality, development, and even disease or illnesses. So, yeah, thank you for tuning in. And if you like the topics that I talk about and you become invested, hit the like button, comment, subscribe, hit the notification button so that you get alerts when a new episode is uploaded. And if you need advice or want to give advice to me or have questions, comments, whatever it may be, you can contact me through my email and my Insta, which are in my About section. But in case for some reason you can't access it, my email is inbalancingthespectrum.podcast@gmail.com, and my Insta is inbalancingthespectrum.pod. So, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, take care.